Dealing with North Korea, tension is again running high as the South steps up sanctions against its northern arch-rival over another nuclear bomb test and rocket launch. Have previous sanctions been effective, and does diplomacy work? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Mike Hanna. North Korea is warning of a preemptive and offensive nuclear strike in response to joint US-South Korean military exercises. The war games, which began on Monday, are part of an annual test of defenses against North Korea. This year, though, government leaders in Seoul say they'll be the largest ever held after the North launched a long-range rocket and conducted another nuclear bomb test. The UN Security Council last week voted to impose an array of new sanctions on North Korea. We'll discuss with our guests if that's the best way to deal with the isolated nation. But first, Rob McBride sets things up from Seoul.
The new measures are designed to put further pressure on North Korea on top of the wide-ranging sanctions already agreed by the United Nations last week. Key individuals and organizations from North Korea and some foreigners giving government support will face sanctions. There will also be further restrictions on trade.
We will entirely ban foreign vessels that have stopped at a North Korean port within 180 days from entering domestic ports.
The restrictions include North Korean restaurants operating overseas, seen as a major source of foreign currency. South Koreans are being urged to eat elsewhere. In the carrot and stick dealings with North Korea, this is a further indication from President Park Geun-hye that North Korea only responds to the stick. From China's foreign minister, a sign of growing alarm at the deteriorating situation.
If tensions are escalated or even grow out of control, it will be disastrous to all parties. As the largest neighboring country of the peninsula, China will not passively watch the peninsula become unstable.
Government leaders in Seoul are showing they're prepared to take tougher unilateral action, whatever the reaction might be from the north. South Korea's spy agency has chosen this moment to release a report alleging wide-scale cyber espionage from the north, hacking into the smartphones of government staff, even targeting the traffic control system of the rail network. North Korea has denied similar accusations in the past. South Korea says these new ones are further evidence of a growing threat that requires a tougher stance. Rob McBride, Al Jazeera, Seoul.
Well, let's now bring in our guests for the discussion. In Hong Kong, Richard Hu, Professor of Political Science at the University of Hong Kong. In Washington, D.C., Robert Manning, Senior Fellow with the Brent Scowcroft Center on International at the Atlantic Council. And in Seoul, via Skype, Byoung-Joo Kim, Adjunct Professor at Hankook University of Foreign Studies. Welcome to you all. Let's begin with Byoung-Joo Kim in Seoul. This is the fifth set of sanctions introduced by the UN Security Council. Is there any reason that they will be more successful than sanctions introduced in the past?
That's a big question, but as far as what we are being told, there are additional sanctions. I mean, the sanction has been escalating throughout the past several years, and they're adding new kinds of sanctions here. So probably, if we're seeking a more impact-filled result here, probably, logically speaking, because they're adding new things we are naturally expecting, a higher or more visible impact. But we don't have any clear way of telling at this point because this is the starting point, of course.
Well, Richard Hu, your view on this issue?
I'm not quite sure the new sanction will be more successful, or the chance to be successful will be larger. Although we see this sanction is tougher and more comprehensive, but North Korean regime is very unpredictable. So we don't know how the regime will respond to these sanctions. And we maybe drive the regime to do something very unpredictable and adventurous. And maybe the regime just ignore the new sanction and continue down the road developing bigger bomb and a longer range of missiles.
Well, we'll return to that point in a moment. But first, Robert Manning, the UN panel of experts has said that the reason why these sanctions have not properly worked in the past is what they call a lack of political will among UN members. What's your view of that statement?
Well, 90% of North Korea's trade is with China. So the effectiveness of these sanctions, and in theory, they are pretty serious, including things like interdicting ships going to and from North Korean ports, banning the sale of jet fuel, banning the sale of dual-use technology that they could use for their nuclear and missile programs, and so on. But it depends on how serious China is about enforcing them.
Well, Byoung-Joo, Kim, that is the key question, is it not? China's role in the implementation of the sanctions against North Korea?
Absolutely, there's no question about that. As Number just mentioned tells us, because of North Korea's exclusive dependence on China's trade with China, definitely a big part of the impact from the sanctions will hinge upon the level of cooperation from China. One hopeful thinking here is that China has recently expressed quite a strong commitment to this new set of sanctions. So we are just hoping that this time China, which is the main player here, will make a difference.
Well, Robert Manning, in addition, the US has also introduced unilateral sanctions, which were signed into law by President Obama last month. So there's almost a two-pronged move going here. You have the Security Council sanctions, plus you have the US sanctions, which are in a number of ways unprecedented. Perhaps also the Treasury Department that's been given the power to look into the role of some international institutions, banks, that are argued to operate as a front for the Pyongyang government. Does this dual set of sanctions actually increase the likelihood of having some kind of effect?
Well, I think the UN sanctions in themselves will cause some pain, but not enough to change North Korea's behavior. I think what we might want to look at is the experience with Iran, because in the case of Iran, the U.S. Treasury took away its ability, SWIFT, which is the ability to conduct international financial sanctions. So I think if we can take away Kim's credit cards, so to speak, that will get North Korea's attention, and I don't believe they will give up their nuclear weapons because they are fundamentally part of the regime's identity, but we might be able to get, for example, a freeze on the production of HEU and plutonium.
Well, the U.S. National Intelligence Director, James... Well, the U.S. National Intelligence Director, James Clapper, made clear last month he now regards North Korea as the world's most worrisome nuclear threat. In his annual threat assessment to the Senate Armed Services Committee, he said, Pyongyang continues to produce fissile material and develop a submarine-launched ballistic missile. He also committed to developing a long-range nuclear-armed missile that's capable of posing a direct threat to the United States, although the system has not been flight tested. Well, Richard Hu, I want to return to that point that you touched on a little bit earlier. Is there the danger that North Korea is being put into a corner? As you said, it's unpredictable how they could react, but some would argue that with these new set of sanctions, they have nothing to lose, which could prove very dangerous.
Yes, in my view, there is a chance North Korea being put into the corner and do something crazy. They are not necessarily respond to sticks the way we predicted. And so there is a difference between Chinese view and American view on this, how far the sanctions should go, and also the strategy, the overall strategy dealing with these issues. Besides sanction, what else we can do? Do we also give North Korean exit strategy to start negotiation with other parties, and then so that's why Chinese propose in a parallel there's a sanction, and China is willing to cooperate implementing the sanction, and in the meanwhile Chinese also propose to restart the P6 talks with North Korea. So we need to give North Korean two-way to let the regime to choose. You want to travel down the road you're doing now, or you want to have a solution and then talk and to have a better security for your country.
Well, Robert Manning, the level of rhetoric in recent days has been exceedingly high from North Korea. Now, this happens every year that these military exercises take place. A lot of angry words are spoken. But is there the sense that, given the added pressure on North Korea, their threats may not be as empty as they have been in the past?
I'd be surprised if they were any less empty. I think North Korea is very good at vitriolic rhetoric, but they are not suicidal. And the fact of the matter is, what we have on the Korean Peninsula is a state of mutual deterrence. And North Korea is about regime survival. We've seen this for the last 30 years. I don't think anything has changed on that front. The wild card is their new leader, who is inexperienced and a little bit volatile, and that's worrisome.
Well, Byoung-Joo, Kim, your view on that? I see you nodding in agreement.
Yes, of course. In many ways, because of the nature of the leadership at this point, which is in Pyongyang right now, and we don't know, we don't have much information about the leadership, even though it has been in place for the past few years, because of the youth, the youngness of the leadership itself. It makes very unpredictable in many ways. So we need much more information, and in that sense, what kind of difference the sanctions will make eventually, it makes it very difficult for us to make any kind of predictions and looking forward into the future for sure.
Robert Manning, there appears to be as well a different set of priorities among those seeking to exert pressure on North Korea. The US and Japan, South Korea, for example, appear to like the end result of regime change, whereas China, as we just heard from Richard Hu, very keen on creating space to allow the resumption of a negotiation process with the P6 talks. Do you see this kind of split in approach, the split in what is wanted as the end game?
Not necessarily. I think that the world would be a lot better off if there was no North Korea, and I think everybody would agree to that. But in terms of objectives, I think denuclearization, the problem is every country has a different set of priorities. The three things everybody wants: no nukes, no war, no collapse. And the problem is, for China, no collapse is a priority above no nukes. I think for the US, Japan, South Korea, denuclearization is at the top of the list. Now, I don't think anybody would be heartbroken if the regime collapsed, but I think what we've seen around the world is the US is not very good at regime change.
Well, Richard Hu, that issue of denuclearization, it's been a stated aim for a long period of time to create a denuclearized peninsula. Yet some would argue that it is no closer to achieving this than it was a decade ago.
Yes, from last decades, we see North Korea is going further down to the road of nuclearization. And P6 talks so far did not generate a positive result. We need to rethink or review our strategy to how to deal with North Korea. So at this moment, all the parties agreed, at least they agreed the sanction measures by the United Nations put on the North Koreans. So I think that's a good start. So let's go ahead and move on with this new sanctions, and then let's see how this will work. And then all parties involved, except North Korea, will continue to monitor the changes, and they should keep in touch, and then to see how they can cooperate further on this as this new things developed.
Well, Robert Manning, some critics argue that the UN and the US are kind of making things up as they go along, that there's no clear vision in terms of what exactly they want to happen in the end stage. What's your view?
Well, I think there is a view that we want to see a denuclearized peninsula. If you look at the previous 2005 agreement and the 229 agreement in 2011, it was very clear there were 5 working groups. Denuclearization was tied to a peace treaty and energy assistance and everything else. The North Koreans walked away from it. Frankly, I think at the end of the day, Americans like to think that all problems have solutions, but some problems can only be managed, and I'm afraid North Korea may be one of those.
Byoung-Joo Kim, your view of that this is a problem that can only be managed rather than at any stage solved?
I wish I could say no, but based on the experience for the past about 2 decades, clearly we haven't been able to find a solution to this. And we understand, assuming that North Korea is a normal country, which is not, by the way, but a normal country would seek means to protect itself and try to find best ways to ensure its survival and security. And let's say if North Korea believes nuclear weapons is the only way to seek their survival and security, it'll be extremely difficult actually to persuade North Korea to give up their final last resort in terms of tools to survive tools to ensure its own survival. So once again, that makes the picture extremely daunting.
Well, Richard Hu, in the past there has been very much a carrot and stick approach to the whole issue. Now, what is the carrot for North Korea? Is there one?
I think at this moment, the first priority is to manage the situation and then put some pressures on North Korea, make them to rethink their options. And in the same time, as I said earlier, we need to offer some carrot. We need to make our door for negotiation open for North Korea. So taking this balanced and gradual strategy, we need more strategic patience, and we need to deal with North Korea with in a more coordinated ways, and manage the issue first, and then pursue with North Korea with the more options on negotiation. I think on the United States part, Washington probably need to rethink some of its stand on negotiation with North Korea.
Well, Robert Manning, a short while ago, you said you should take away the credit cards would be a very effective tool. But do you believe that there does need to be some kind of enticement for the North Koreans to get into some kind of diplomatic process?
Yes, of course. And the Obama administration has been quite willing to negotiate whenever they want to put their nuclear weapons on the table. The problem has been that what we see as a carrot, they see as a poison carrot, because they're afraid of any kind of opening up. They don't want a McDonald's on every street corner, and that's been the problem. We don't have anything to offer them that, in their view, is worth giving up the insurance policy of their nuclear weapons. And I don't have an answer to that. I think at some point, what's interesting now is that the new leader in North Korea has made economic development a major part of his agenda. And I don't believe he can achieve that as long as he has nuclear weapons. So there may be some hope that at some point he decides that they're worth trading for economic assistance and joining the global economy.
Well, Byoung-Joo, Kim, that's an important point. We have heard these statements out of North Korea about priorities being placed on economic development. Is nuclear development and economic development compatible in any way? Clearly, it would appear not.
Well, that's Kim Jong-un's words. He's saying that they're going to be seeking the dual track, the two pillars together. And at the same time, they're making it very clear that nuclear weapons is something that's not negotiable. That's not something that's to be negotiated on the table. So it's a good thing that they're seeking economic development. That's all great news. But if what we want is for North Korea to give up their nuclear weapons, and when they say that is not negotiable, it's once again very extremely difficult situation where what we can do in terms of negotiation and what kind of carrots we can offer here, because they're saying nuclear weapons cannot be negotiated. So, another guest talked about the need for dialogue and all that, but dialogue and negotiation. But when they say no, their nuclear weapons is not negotiable, I don't know how we can approach the whole situation. So that's why we're in a very, very challenging situation here.
Well, Richard Hugh, I mean, that issue about nuclear weapons being non-negotiable as far as North Korea is concerned, that would appear to undercut any attempts to get wider sets of talks going, would it not?
Yes, it is true. North Korea is a very tough nut to crack. They say that before the nuclear weapon is non-negotiable, but in fact, in the end, eventually they return to the negotiation table. So that's why I said some strategic patience is needed here, and also parties involved need to also show some gestures willing to talk to North Korean. So we need to have dual strategy, as other speakers says. We are now putting pressure on North Korean, see how they respond to the stick. But in the meanwhile, we should not give up the hope for talk with North Koreans. So now let's see how they respond to the sanction, how they respond to the heat of the economic difficulties. I think at some point they will rethink their options and then maybe return to the negotiation table.
Byoung-Joo, Kim, I see you shaking your head there.
Yeah, when you're saying that, you're assuming that you have the same system in North Korea, same leaders. That's not the case. When North Korea came to the table to negotiate about nuclear weapons, that was a long time ago, at the time of this current leader's grandfather. And this current leader's father did a different thing about making nuclear weapons quite unnegotiable, and we saw the limits coming in. And this current leader, the grandson of the leader who initiated this nuclear process, he seems to have a totally different mindset here. And his grandfather's case, they didn't really have anything at that time. This time they have something, looks like they have something in their hand. And they're quite adamant, they're not giving up what they have in their hand. So it's not the same story here. And if you're talking about the need for negotiation and dialogue, you're talking about bringing rolling the history backwards. And that's not something that can happen if you understand and if we understand the details about what exactly had happened for the last 20 years.
Well, Robert Manning, very quickly, you mentioned that a poisoned carrot is what North Korea was concerned about. Is there a carrot that could be given very quickly that is not poisoned?
Only if they change their priorities. Because if they're more concerned about threats to a very brittle regime that operates on a kind of terror police state basis, they're afraid. The Chinese have been telling them for 30 years to reform and open up the way China has, and they've refused because they're afraid their regime won't be able to survive any kind of opening. So I'm skeptical, frankly, but I think we need to make sure that's on the table. Anytime they want to join the rest of the world, they should be welcome, and the price tag is their nuclear weapons.
Well, at that point, thanks to all our guests, Richard Hu, Robert Manning, and Byoung-Joo Kim. And thank you too for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Mike Hanna, and the whole team here, goodbye for now.